The first time Tessa Whitlock climbed into my bed, I thought my life was about to be ruined by something neither of us had chosen. She was asleep, trembling like a frightened child, whispering words that made my blood turn cold, and by the time the sun rose, I understood that what had happened was not a scandal, not a mistake, and not a joke, but a cry for help that she had been burying for years. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment from your heart, share it with someone who needs a little light today, and subscribe to our channel so our family can keep growing around stories that remind us what compassion can do. My name was Everett Cole, and when I first rented the spare room in Tessa's narrow blue house on Briar Lane, I thought I was only looking for a quiet place to rebuild my life. I had just lost my job at a printing company that shut down without warning, my savings were almost gone, and my engagement to a woman named Claire had ended in the kind of silence that hurts more than shouting. Tessa was 29, worked mornings at a bakery, and moved through the world with careful politeness, as if she was always trying not to take up too much space. She had pale gray eyes, copper-brown hair usually pinned messily above her neck, and a smile that appeared quickly but vanished before anyone could trust it. The house belonged to her late grandmother, and everything inside it seemed preserved by grief: embroidered curtains, porcelain birds, faded family photos, and the faint smell of lavender polish. She told me on my first day that she sometimes walked in her sleep, but she said it with such embarrassed speed that I barely understood the seriousness of it. I promised I was a heavy sleeper and joked that unless she tried to make pancakes at dawn, I would survive. She laughed, but the sound was too thin to be real. For the first few weeks, our lives stayed separate in the polite way roommates often prefer. Tessa left before sunrise for the bakery and returned in the afternoon dusted with flour, carrying unsold rolls for me in a brown paper bag. I spent my days applying for jobs from the kitchen table, pretending not to notice when rejection emails arrived one after another. We shared small conversations over coffee, weather, leaking gutters, and the old maple tree that shaded the front porch. But there were strange things too. Some mornings, a kitchen chair would be turned toward the back door. A glass of water would sit untouched on the hallway floor. Once, I found the front door chain hooked from the inside, though neither of us remembered doing it. Tessa always apologized with shame burning across her face, and I always told her it was fine, because it was fine, at least until the morning after she appeared in my room shaking, climbed into my bed as if she belonged there, curled against my shoulder, and whispered, "Please don't let the smoke take me." I did not move. I did not touch her except to gently place a blanket between us and keep my hands where she could see them when she woke. The room had begun to fill with early light, and I sat frozen until she opened her eyes and saw where she was. The scream she swallowed was worse than a scream. She stumbled back, her face drained white, clutching the blanket to her chest even though she was fully dressed in sweatpants and an oversized college shirt. I started explaining before she could accuse me, speaking softly and quickly, telling her she had walked in asleep, that I had not invited her, that I had not taken advantage, that I had stayed awake because I was scared to wake her suddenly. But Tessa was no longer looking at me. She was staring at the little strip of sunlight on the floor, breathing like someone standing at the edge of a cliff. Then she apologized so many times that each apology sounded less like manners and more like punishment. By breakfast, she had packed a small bag and said she would stay with a coworker until I could find another place. I told her she did not need to leave her own house. She said she did, because people always left after they saw what was wrong with her, and she would rather be the one to go first. That sentence, spoken in a kitchen full of morning light and untouched coffee, hurt me more than I expected. It sounded too much like the way I had felt after Claire returned my ring without anger, without explanation, as if I was simply another broken object she no longer wanted in her home. That I convinced Tessa to sit on the porch with me because the day was bright, the neighbors were trimming hedges, and the ordinary noise of the street made everything feel less dangerous. She would not look at me at first. She kept twisting the paper bakery bag in her hands until it tore. Slowly, in fragments, she told me that the sleepwalking had started when she was 16, after a house fire took her younger sister, Laurel. Tessa had been the one who woke first. She had tried to get Laurel out, but smoke filled the hallway, and a firefighter pulled Tessa through a window before she could reach the bedroom door. Her parents survived, but grief turned them into strangers. Her father drank until his heart failed 7 years later. Her mother moved across the country and sent holiday cards written like business notes. Tessa inherited the blue house from her grandmother and became very good at appearing fine. But some mornings she woke in closets, beside locked doors, or on the kitchen floor with her hands bruised from pushing against walls that were not burning. She had seen doctors before, but every appointment felt like proof that she was defective. So she learned to hide it. She chose roommates carefully, warned them lightly, and prayed they would never witness the worst of it. Most left anyway. Something changed between us after that porch conversation, not suddenly, not romantically, but humanly. I stopped being the unemployed man renting a room, and she stopped being the quiet woman with a troubling secret. We became two people trying to keep one another from disappearing. I installed simple safety latches high on the doors with her permission, moved sharp objects into drawers, and placed soft bells on the hallway doorknobs so movement would wake me without startling her. Tessa hated needing help, but I told her help was not a cage, it was a railing on a steep staircase. During the day, we made the house safer together. She showed me where the floorboards creaked. I fixed a loose window in the laundry room. She made lemon scones and pretended she had burned them so I would not feel bad eating 6. I found part-time work delivering furniture, and when my first paycheck came, she left a note on the table saying the house felt luckier since I arrived. I kept that note in my wallet for weeks, not because it meant love, but because it meant I was useful to someone again, but healing never moves in a straight line. One bright Saturday morning, after a difficult week at the bakery, Tessa woke to find every cabinet in the kitchen open and a chair placed under the smoke detector. She broke down on the tile floor, shaking with humiliation, and said she could not keep living like a haunted person. I wanted to comfort her, but I said the wrong thing. I told her Laurel would not want her to suffer forever. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I had stepped somewhere sacred without permission. Tessa stood up, eyes burning, and said I did not get to use her sister's name like a bandage. She left for work without another word. All afternoon, guilt sat on my chest as heavy as stone. I realized kindness could still become cruelty when it rushed ahead of understanding. When she came home, I apologized without defending myself. I told her I had spoken from fear, not wisdom, and that her grief did not need to become smaller just because it made me uncomfortable. Tessa listened from the doorway, flower on her sleeves, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once and said forgiveness did not erase pain, but it made room to breathe. The unexpected turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon when a woman in a cream coat appeared at the front gate carrying a faded yellow envelope. Tessa saw her through the kitchen window and went still. It was her mother, Vivian, older than the photographs in the hallway, thinner, with silver threaded through her blonde hair and regret written into every line of her face. Tessa did not open the door at first. She stood behind it with her hand over her mouth while Vivian waited in the sun, not knocking again, as if she knew she had lost the right to demand entry. Finally, Tessa stepped outside. I stayed in the kitchen, but through the window I saw the conversation unfold in broken gestures, Vivian offering the envelope, Tessa refusing it, Vivian lowering her head, Tessa turning away, then turning back because some part of her was tired of running from unfinished things. Later, Tessa told me the envelope held Laurel's drawings, saved from a storage box her mother had kept for 13 years but never had the courage to send. There was also a letter, not asking to be excused, not pretending grief justified abandonment, only admitting that Vivian had failed her living daughter while mourning the dead one. For 3 days, Tessa did not open the envelope. She carried it from room to room like something hot enough to burn. The house became painfully quiet. I wanted to tell her what to do, but I had learned by then that love, even friendship love, is not control dressed up as concern. So I cooked soup badly, watered her grandmother's porch plants, and sat nearby without filling the silence. On the 4th morning, sunlight spilled across the living room carpet, and Tessa opened the envelope with trembling hands. Laurel's drawings were bright, messy, and full of little houses with huge yellow suns over them. One drawing showed two sisters holding hands beside a crooked blue house. On the back, in childish pencil, Laurel had written that Tessa was brave because she could reach the highest shelf. Tessa laughed once, then cried so hard that I thought something inside her was breaking, but it was not breaking. It was opening. She pressed the drawing to her chest and said she had spent 13 years remembering Laurel only through smoke, sirens, and guilt, when Laurel had also been crayons, pancakes, missing teeth, and songs shouted from the bathtub. For the first time, grief had given back a memory instead of taking one. That afternoon, Tessa called a sleep specialist. It sounded simple, but it was the bravest thing I had ever watched someone do. She asked me to sit beside her while she made the call, not to speak for her, only to remind her with my presence that she was not alone. The appointments began the following week, always in daylight, always followed by coffee or a walk around the park because Tessa said medical offices made her feel like a problem to be solved. The doctor explained that trauma could turn sleep into a doorway the mind walked through when it could not rest. Tessa began therapy too, and some days she returned furious, some days exhausted, some days lighter. I was changing as well. Watching her fight for her life made me stop treating my own disappointments like a final verdict. I applied for better jobs, accepted interviews without assuming rejection, and called my older brother, Nolan, after 2 years of silence. I apologized for vanishing when my engagement ended. He cried before I did, and by the time the call ended, I had remembered that pride can become another locked door if you let it. The hardest test came during the town's summer street fair, held under a clean blue sky with flags stretched across Briar Lane and children chasing bubbles through the heat. Tessa had agreed to run a bakery stall with her coworker, but when a vendor nearby burned sugar on a grill, smoke drifted across the sidewalk. It was not dangerous, barely more than a gray ribbon, but Tessa's body reacted before her mind could argue. She froze behind the table, face blank, hands gripping the edge so hard her knuckles whitened. People kept passing, laughing, buying pies, unaware that 13 years had suddenly collapsed into one breath. I moved beside her and quietly asked her to name 5 things she could see. She whispered the red awning, the lemonade pitcher, my blue shirt, a child's balloon, and Laurel's drawing, which she had tucked into a clear frame on the table for courage. Her breathing slowed. Then Vivian, who had come to the fair but kept a respectful distance, stepped forward with tears in her eyes and asked if she could stand there too. Tessa looked at her mother for a long time. The old wound did not vanish. But Tessa moved half a step aside, and that tiny space became the beginning of forgiveness. By late afternoon, the bakery stall sold out. Tessa was tired but smiling in a way I had never seen before, not thin or temporary, but real enough to stay. Vivian bought the last loaf of cinnamon bread and asked Tessa if they might have tea one day, not as mother and daughter trying to repair everything at once, but as 2 women willing to begin honestly. Tessa said one day would be okay. I watched her say it and felt something quiet bloom in my chest. It was not the dramatic love people write songs about. It was steadier than that, built from shared breakfasts, repaired windows, careful apologies, and the sacred trust of being present when someone wakes from fear. Weeks later, when Tessa told me she no longer wanted me to move out even after I found full-time work at a design shop, I asked if she meant as a roommate or something more. She smiled at the porch floor, cheeks pink in the morning sun, and said we should start with dinner, honesty, and no running away. It was the most beautiful answer I had ever received. Months passed, and the house on Briar Lane changed slowly. The porcelain bird stayed, but the curtains were washed, the walls repainted warm cream, and Laurel's drawing was framed in the hallway where sunlight reached it every morning. Tessa still had difficult nights sometimes, but they became rarer, and when they happened, she no longer woke drowning in shame. She woke knowing there were bells on the doors, a doctor who believed her, a mother trying to make amends, and a man across the hall who respected her enough to protect her without owning her pain. My own life became wider too. I stopped measuring myself by what I had lost. I learned that being trusted is not the same as being needed, and that love is not proven by grand rescue, but by patient presence. One morning, Tessa found me fixing the porch railing and handed me coffee exactly the way I liked it. She leaned against the doorway and said the house did feel luckier now, but not because I had arrived. Because both of us had finally stopped pretending we were fine alone. Just before autumn, Tessa invited her mother for breakfast. They sat at the kitchen table in the sun, awkward and tender, passing butter and jam like peace offerings. Vivian apologized again, and this time Tessa did not rush to comfort her. She let the apology stand. Then she said she was angry, she was hurt, and she was willing to try. That was forgiveness in its truest form, not a door thrown open, but a window unlocked. I stood at the sink washing plates and felt honored simply to witness it. Before the morning ended, Tessa placed Laurel's drawings between them, and mother and daughter laughed through tears at the crooked suns and impossible houses. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. And before this story ends, tell us in the comments what you believe is harder, forgiving someone who left, or forgiving yourself for surviving what you could not save. The day Tessa climbed into my bed while sleepwalking could have become the moment everything fell apart. Instead, because fear was met with patience instead of judgment, it became the first step toward a life neither of us expected. We did not heal because pain disappeared. We healed because it was finally witnessed in daylight. Years later, when people asked how we became so close, Tessa would smile and say I once guarded a secret I could have misunderstood. I would say she taught me that broken people are not burdens, they are houses with rooms waiting for light. And every morning, when sunlight crossed Laurel's drawing in the hallway, the blue house seemed to glow as if the child who drew it had known all along that grief would not get the final word, that love could still find the door, and that even after smoke, silence, and years of loneliness, a family could be rebuilt one brave morning at a time.